Welcome to the Daphne-CHILD Grantee Spotlight series, where we showcase the innovative work of our grantees in combating violence against children. The Daphne-CHILD program is a collaborative initiative funded by the European Union, led by Eurochild and Terre des Hommes, empowering grassroots civil society organizations across 9 European countries through a comprehensive 3-year sub-granting and capacity building program. You can learn more at Daphne.childhub.org. That's Daphne.childhub.org.
My name is Zsófia Karetka, and today I'm speaking with Samuel Romero from the Down Syndrome Associations of Valencia in Spain about their project empowering children and young people with Down syndrome to combat bullying and violence. Samuel, a warm welcome to the podcast. Good to have you here.
Thank you very much. It's a pleasure to be here with you.
Shall we start by you telling us about yourself first and your role in the association, and then what the association does in Valencia?
Yeah, sure. ASINDOWN is an association that works with and for people with Down syndrome and all their environment and families. And we just try to pretend to have all the inclusion that they should have in all the educational, social, labor. We try to put some pressure on society to incorporate them as a full part of their lives. My role is here, I'm the project director, so I coordinate all the projects that we develop here in the association, not from the point of view of an assistant point of view. It is all these projects that they have an impact in society. And that's my role here, just trying to have a good impact in society, trying to develop good projects with public administration, with companies, so that inclusion is not just a speech, it's a reality in a short term of period.
Diving more into the project, could you tell us a bit about the specific challenges that children with Down syndrome face regarding bullying and violence, please? What do you see?
Yeah, there is a problem of the concept of violence that sometimes we just define violence as an aggression or an insult or something like this. And violence, we try to make society to know that it is much more than this. It is also all these little things and invisible things that happen behind or before the aggression that make someone to feel apart. That is our starting point. So what we try to develop is a program that assess, that accompanies, that give formation, that give training to all these people with Down syndrome, their families, teachers, and all the groups that are in contact with them, in order to prevent and react when any kind of violence is happening, especially with young people, with people with Down syndrome. Happens with early ages, and it has a really negative impact in all their lives. And the real problem is that it's a continuous problem in their lives. It is something that they experiment when they are 6 years old, when they are 10, when they start to get different training courses, when they are in any leisure project, when they try to work. It is a continuous on their lives, and we need to give them all the tools, and we need to change society in this way, trying to prevent instead of reacting to bullying.
Yes. Would you say that it's normalized in the life of these children?
Yeah, it is totally normalized. We did a campaign a few years ago trying to get some figures of what was happening, and we stopped doing it because we realized that it was everyone. Everyone suffered bullying at some point, or they have some kind of violence in their lives. They try to get into a club and they say, no, you cannot because you have Down syndrome. They are put apart from their friends group when they move from primary to secondary levels at school. It is something that it is so normalized that we need to do something, and have been doing something. But with this scheme and this project, now we have more tools and we have more power to teach families, to teach teachers, to give them tools. And at the end of the day, just teaching society on how to act in these situations, how to prevent, and how bullying is something that it is so contagious that we need to stop. And people with Down syndrome is something that they suffer from very early ages until the end of their days. So it is and public administration, they should understand how this is happening and how put all these tools in between these people, because we need to right now.
Society might have a common understanding of what constitutes for a violent act, but you also see the importance of all the little things that lead up to it, if I understood you correctly. What are such things, and how does, and you partly answered this already, but help us understand, how does bullying manifest differently for children with Down syndrome compared to other children?
Bullying is different in people with Down syndrome in two ways. The first way is the way they suffer it, because it starts really early, and sometimes it's not even intentional, in the way that they are being removed of the class just because the learning procedure or the learning progress is not in line with the rest of the class. Sometimes they are, because of that, they start feeling a part of the group. They start being removed of the games, of the jokes. This happens little by little, and it is not like a specific sign that bullying is happening. And the other problem is that they don't have the channels to speak out. People without Down syndrome or without intellectual disability, they will manifest in some point that they are suffering bullying because they don't want to go to school, or they just will feel sad, or that kind of things. But people with Down syndrome, sometimes they don't have the environment to manifest that. They cannot speak out. They cannot tell what they are feeling, because it is part of their disability. It is difficult for them to identify their feelings. It is difficult to them to speak out and see this is happening. Some friend is doing me this, at school is happening this, on social media is happening this. They cannot do that. So we need to modify also the environment. Bullying is prevented and bullying is reacted. And also, yeah, they suffer in some different ways, because they start at the early ages, as I was saying, and it continues through their lives. It happens then when they try to progress in their lives after school. It happens again when they try to find a job. It happens when they want to go out. It happens when they want to practice a sport. It's all the time. They will identify barriers, or they will crash into barriers that they don't allow them to have a good life, or at least to continue with their project life.
Yeah, that's a very bleak picture, but let us now turn to your project with Daphne-CHILD, which addresses multiple forms of violence, so the physical, the emotional, the sexual, the peer violence, the cyberbullying, but also something called institutional violence.
It is part of what we were talking before. Institutional violence describes that is very specific, like the system that should protect these people with Down syndrome. They are not designed to protect everyone. This means because how the protocols, the times, the languages, the procedures, the decision, how they are designed and how they work, they are not taking into consideration the needs of people with Down syndrome, because they have specific needs that we should know and that we should address. And how this looks. For example, protocols are completely inaccessible. Every school has an anti-bullying protocol, but it is written in a language that they cannot understand. They don't understand how it works, who they have to talk with when something is happening, and they don't consider how bullying happens with people with Down syndrome. It is also something very typical, like minimization due to the ignorance. I mean, sometimes it is that, oh, they're just kids. I'm sure it is part of their disability, these kind of things that sometimes people with Down syndrome, they're trying to manifest that something is happening, that bullying is happening. They tend to assign this to part of the disability, or they are just a bit sad because something happened at school, but it is not bullying. And all the procedures are not taking into account this. And also the late response, because when they want to realize that something is happening, normally it's too late, and there's a lot of harm happening before that it is too late to modify. Or maybe the harm of these people, it is too big now to start the procedure, and we need to intervene when families are in a really bad situation, when these kids are in a really bad situation. And what we are trying to tell when we talk about institutional violence is that we need to address all this. We need to break all these walls, but taking into account the needs of the people with intellectual disability, and specifically the needs of people with Down syndrome, because protection has to be accessible. They need to understand what to do, who to go, when something happens, how they need to manifest that. And even we need to teach them to identify these signs that something is happening. And that's the point where the protocol has to be activated. They are not designed for them, and that is a really big problem. And we think it is a kind of institutional violence.
Yes, I completely agree. And what you've been saying really resonates with some of the other projects with Daphne-CHILD that I've been talking to in this podcast. So it's often the case that there is a code of conduct. There are reporting mechanisms on paper, but they are really not written in a child-friendly way. They are not accessible for the children. It's a bit of a tick box exercise. So many of the projects try to make them child-friendly together with the children to make it their own. Anyway, back to your project. What's striking about your approach is that 65 children, if that's right, young people with Down syndrome are actively co-creating the conference materials. So there will be a conference, as I understand, with posters and digital presentations. So they are not just recipients, but creators. Can you walk us through a bit about what the project will actually look like?
For us, this is the key of the project. We are used to read and to understand this probation as it is done for children, and it's done from an adult perspective. And sometimes it works in some situations, but most of the times they don't reach them, and especially people with Down syndrome, because they need to be part of the solution. If we just present them the tool that, okay, here you have what you should be doing, but if they don't understand the tool, or if they don't understand the signs of bullying, we will be doing nothing, because they cannot use the tool that we have designed. So we need to think in resources that they have to be designed by them. We try to guide in the design of the resource, but they have to be validated by them, and they have to understand what the resource is. So what we are trying to do is to modify all these protocols to have a good campaign that it is helping people with Down syndrome to say, okay, this is what is happening to me, and now I understand what I have to do. So we want them to denormalize that being out of the group, it is not just what should be happening. That is bullying. That getting a part of the group at school because, oh, you're not going to understand that is violence, and they need to address that. And also we need to train families and all the context to identify these signs. And the way we need to do is co-creating, because in that way we will break another wall, because our project is all about breaking walls, and it is the wall of resignation, because they suffer of that resignation where they don't know where to go, how to interact, and how is this mechanism of preventing bullying. And that's why we are designing all these. It is not designing new mechanisms, it's trying to get what we have right now and adapt to the needs of people with Down syndrome. Because the mechanism is a lot of people thinking of them, but the thing is they're just not taking into consideration how they should interact with people with Down syndrome, because they have a different way of thinking, a different way of feeling, and this is not taken into account. We need to address this, and that's why we are designing our project with a co-creation, where they validate what we are designing, they understand what we are trying to do, and we teach them to identify what is happening to them, and that this feeling that they have, it is motivated because they are suffering violence. We try to teach them all these kinds of violence. We try to teach families how to identify any violence to their kids. Without this co-creation with families and people without syndrome, we will end up with a good tool that all the public administration can take into account and modify these procedures, their regulation, and consider that Down syndrome kids as part of the solution as well.
So you are co-creating materials with the children that will sensitize other actors and institutional actors to the issue, but also children, their classmates. So is this campaign aimed at their classmates as well and other peers?
Yeah, of course. Yeah. It is when we design something with this inclusive perspective that we are taking into account all the cognitive accessibility that people with Down syndrome needs. That will help everyone. This campaign goes along with sensibilization at the school with their friends. We try to make them part of the solution as well. So bullying is something that we have in all our society. We have bullying in all our schools, and we need to make all these children leaders of the change. We need to tell them that their role is really important, but without putting the pressure on them. People with Down syndrome, they don't have the responsibility of stopping bullying, but they have to have the voice of telling them how they are suffering and what do they need to stop this, or what do they need after bullying is happening. So that is what we try to do. And their peers, it is a really important part of the change, because it is probably someone that can speak out when something is happening. They can identify with a role of helping these people with Down syndrome at the school, with their friends. So yeah, part of the solution is happening, of course, with their friends, with their peers, because it is one of the main focus when bullying is happening. So if you act in there, preventing, training, giving them some sensibilization, we will be addressing part of the problem.
Yes, thank you very much. Obviously, bullying, violence, suffering, these are extremely sensitive topics. So how do you ensure that these children feel safe talking about this in the first place, and then meaningfully participate in designing these anti-bullying materials?
Sometimes what is happening that if this on these early stages when bullying appears, that it is in an invisible way, sometimes they don't realize what is happening. So we are trying to teach them it is to identify these early little things that will create the massive problem of bullying afterwards, because these early things are like the first signs. It is a joke that because of they have Down syndrome, it is we don't want to play with you because you don't understand the game. It is we are not going to eat with you because you eat too slow. It is laughing when they try to speak because they cannot pronounce some words properly. It is all the little things that we need to tell them, this is not normal. This is not something that you need to feel. You need to speak out, and we need to create that environment. And that's the most important thing. The most important thing is trying to identify what they need to speak out. Do they need a family situation? Do they need someone at school that they have a good relationship to speak out? Do we need an external observer to identify these things? This is the way our project is working, to identify all the specific environments where the people with Down syndrome, the kids with Down syndrome, will be able to speak out in a safe environment. Creating this safe environment, we don't have a unique solution, because sometimes even the family is not an ally on these things. Sometimes the school, it is not the best environment for them, or sometimes their friends, they are not really their friends. So we need to identify like multiple solutions so that we can give to each kid the one that is going to work, or at least different options. You can try to speak with your mom, you can try to speak with your father, you can identify with your basketball teacher. But in order to reach that solution, we need to speak with them a lot. And with all these questions and asking to all these 65 kids that we are interviewing and we are teaching and we are leading, I think we will end up with multiple solutions that will help to many people to speak out in a safe environment, to identify bullying in the early stages, and of course to sensibilize society on what is happening with people with Down syndrome in relation to bullying through their childhood, adolescence, and through their lives in definitive.
So these 65 children, you have been in contact with them before. So they are children who have been in one way or another working with the association. Is that correct?
Yes, that's correct. So for this project, we have something already built, that it is that confidence with the family and with the person with Down syndrome. So we have identified already that safe environment. We know how to create that safe environment for them because we already know them and they already know us. So it is someone that is coming Monday and Wednesday, 2 hours, trying to teach them what schools doesn't teach them. We already create that environment because there is already a confidence between the teacher and the kid with Down syndrome. So introducing this project, it is very delicate, especially with families. But with the kids, we already have this confidence in guiding them that, have you ever felt this way? What did you do? What your teacher did? Was it at school or was it afterwards in social media? How did you act? What would you like to do after this? And we start to get all the information from them because they already feel safe when they speak to our teachers. But it is really into our organization to get to that point in any of the projects that we work, not only in this project of preventing bullying and acting through bullying.
In terms of the workshops that you have with these children in the frame of this project, so you mentioned using interactive dynamics and digital technologies. So I just wonder what that means in practice, or in more layman's terms for us to understand. And what kind of tools or activities in your experience, so very concretely, so what kind of tools help children with Down syndrome express their experiences?
There is not, as I was saying before, there's no one solution because each of them, they have a different way of speaking out. We have people with Down syndrome that they are really talkative and they speak to you all what happened at school. And in the other hand, we have some others that they don't have the ability even to speak, or they have a lot of difficulties to express their feelings. So there's no one tool. So that's why we try with multiple solutions, depending on the best way the kid can express their feelings or their needs. We have some of them that try to replicate what their feelings so that they can identify their feelings through video, through interactive platforms that they can be moving into a presentation as if they were themselves projecting themselves into a game. So we try different technological solutions and also physical solutions when we try to identify feelings in some way that the kid will understand what is happening. We try to give them some situations that maybe they are not related to bullying, try to identify the feelings, for example, even joy or happiness with a good plan with their family or friends, or even sadness when something bad happening to the family. And then we have different technological solutions because some of them can speak out very, very well. Some of them, they have a lot of difficulty to speak. So we need to try to interact with some technological programs so that they can put into this, imagine that it is something similar to a game and something into a game is happening to that person. So they can reflect themselves into that person. So that will help them to identify this is what happened to me. We can bring that feeling into the session and try to identify how to modify that feeling, how to identify that feeling, what is provoking that feeling in the bully situation. It is really difficult. It is really difficult because some of them can express themselves, but some others, putting into words what they are feeling, it is sometimes impossible. And we need to use all the tools, the educational tools, trying to guide them into identifying the feeling.
You also mentioned in the project description that the children will be invited to lead some of the sessions themselves. So, and I wonder what that looks like when a young person with Down syndrome leads an anti-bullying workshop.
It is important to de-romanticize this leadership. It is not being the perfect spoken person or putting leadership for us in this project. It means having an active role. It is occupying a place with a meaning. No, I mean, it is opening the dynamic. It's explaining a message to others. It is facilitating part of the session. It is presenting a resource that they have created. It is presenting a project that they have been working on here in ASINDOWN. And we prepare them like step by step, taking great care of the environment. It cannot be an exposure for them. It has to be a safe experience. So the first relation with the school in this project, it cannot be putting them in front of the class to explain something. First, we need to change the environment of that class. We need to make them feel how these people is feeling, and then they can be part of the session and they can be these leaders that we want them to be. And there is a lot of invisible work. We need to prepare them. We need to anticipate these nerves. We need to adjust the pace. They have to be prepared for that session because if not, it can work in the other way. It has a really powerful educational effect on the rest of the community. When a young person with Down syndrome leads, just the audience start to adjust their view. They begin to see competence when they saw dependence before. And that is real inclusion. It is just not being there. It is being recognized. It is being a part active of the change. And in this way, we will break another wall. It is the low expectation. It is something that a lot of people has with people with Down syndrome. They have a really low expectation, and that is why they are always put apart. And we need to bring them to the front. Firstly, preparing them, trying to show other class and other teachers that they can be part of the solution and that they can be a really active part of the class, not only in that session, but in the rest of the classes at the school.
And you mentioned so many walls that are there for you to break.
Yes.
Just wondering which wall, in your personal opinion, if you like, is the hardest to break around this phenomenon involving children with Down syndrome, the phenomenon of violence and bullying?
It is probably the isolation wall. That feeling that they feel alone at school, that they don't have anyone to speak with, make them know how they feel. The isolation is really one of the biggest problems in bullying, and especially with people with Down syndrome, because they have the feeling that no one is understanding them. That isolation, I think, is one of the biggest walls, and I think is one of the most problematic walls, because it is the change of everything. It is changing the way emotions are shown, and it's also changing the way the environment works with them.
Among all the walls, what's the easiest one to break, in your opinion?
I really think the low expectations. It is not an easy one. There's no easy wall to break, but probably the low expectations when you do a dynamic work at this class, where the people with Down syndrome, they have an important role. You change the expectations, or when we show them some examples of people with Down syndrome doing great things, that doesn't mean having a good career or having a master's degree at university. No. It is doing interesting things, or it is when we show them how they work in all these different works when they are an adult. The low expectations, well, it is probably the easiest to remove. That doesn't mean that it's easy, but it is something that we can make people to change their way they see them. Also, we are working a lot in project in cognition accessibility, where they have a really active role in this change. For example, adapting text, adapting places, adapting all the even objects, where our kids with Down syndrome and our adults with Down syndrome, they are the experts of adapting all these things, and we can show them the results of the work. So this low expectation walls starts getting lower little by little.
You mentioned the families and involving the families many times in the answer. So I understand that your project does involve families with 6 awareness sessions and 3 meetings to build support networks that you also refer to several times. So why is the family component so critical? So what role do families play in either protecting children from bullying or perhaps unintentionally contributing to their vulnerability?
Yeah, for us, the family, it is a key part of this for 2 reasons. Firstly, because they detect it earlier, because they spend more time with their kids, and also because they sustain afterwards. A child with Down syndrome may not verbalize, I am being bullied, or this is happening to me, but the family can start seeing some little changes: refusal to go to school, irritability, sadness, somatization, isolation. There are some early signs that we need to teach the families to identify. And then there is all the emotional support. If the kid thinks that telling something will make them feel worse, they will stay silent. That is why we need the family to have all the tools and to create a climate where speaking is safe, that it doesn't become like, what did you do? But I believe you. Let's understand what is happening. Let's act. You can speak to us. You are safe in here. We are going to change this. We are going to solve this. And in there, we accompany a lot. Sometimes the first real intervention is simply to prepare the conversation at home. What to ask, how to listen, how not to rush, how to not minimize what they are telling you. Because this is very important, because many families experience bullying with a mix of fear, exhaustion, and guilt. The family has that specific role in order to identify the little things at the beginning, and also to put all the good emotional support afterwards. And there is also a preventive aspect in the digital world that families, they have a really big role in there. Families that learn to set reasonable limits, to understand the risk, to detect the signs of cyberbullying without falling into total control. That balance into control and having an eye of cyberbullying requires a continuous conversation, and that is why the continuity of the project is really important. It is not only of intervening one day of preparing a session with the family one day. It has to be a continuous with them, because the situation about bullying, it changes. It doesn't manifest in the same way. And many families arrive tired to this. When they understand that they are not alone, that there is a path, you realize that the energy changes, the capacity of the act changes. And the word that we were talking before about the isolation, that it is not only the isolation of the kid, it's the isolation of the family. We start to break down this wall. There is something important to mention in here. It is that I think Spain is realizing the problem that we have, not only with bullying with people with Down syndrome, that bullying in general, because we have a specific law of protection the kids. They are modifying this law, making them, from our point of view, better. This new law is reinforcing the idea that it's not only about reacting, that is about preventing. It is detecting earlier and it's protecting well. For us, this is really important because it legitimizes the protection. It has a specific focus on the right to be heard and listened, and that obligation to avoid the secondary victimization, that is one of the main problems that we also address. So this is something that congratulates us that we are going in the good path, and that also Spain is evolving in the good path.
For other organizations working with children with disabilities who face bullying and violence, what would be your key advice?
I will start with listening. It is the main part of this, because many times the protocol exists, there is always a good intention, and we have the resource, but they cannot explain what is happening in the way we have designed this procedure. So change the way we listen. It is really important. We need to focus on that. Every kid will explain themselves in a different way. We need to give them time. We need to understand all these early signs. We need to listen, not only by hearing of them, but to be prepared to identify these early things. Another thing I think is the continuity and the review, because in bullying, what seems small at the beginning, these repeated jokes, the exclusion, the humiliation, can become consolidated. The protocol is not just that we do something one day and that's it. We got a tick on this role. No. It has to be a continuous supervision, and we need to review our protocols. We need to adapt to every situation, and that is something that we need to highlight as well. Something very important that we spoke before, and it will be the third thing to identify. It is to do things with them and not for them. Especially that in people with intellectual disability, this is really important. We need to put them in an active role and try to understand how they manifest bullying or how they suffer bullying. That is doing something with them and not for them. Because if we try to think in an adult way, or we try to think in people without intellectual disability way, we will always leave these people out of our project. Probably the last thing will be families and the digital world, and the problem that families and digital world have to address from the very beginning. It is a really relevant part of bullying, and now moves to online environments because of persistence, because of the exposure, because of repetition, because of exclusion also in the digital environments. And if an intervention doesn't consider the digital work, it will fall. So we need to include families, and we need to include the digital world from the very beginning, because they have a really important role in preventing and acting in bullying.
Very true. Samuel Romero from the Down Syndrome Association of Valencia in Spain, thank you so much for joining us today and sharing these very important insights with us.
Thank you very much. It's been a pleasure.
To our listeners, thank you for joining us for this episode of the Daphne-CHILD program's Grantee Spotlight series. You can learn more about this program and all the 48 grantee projects across 9 countries at our website daphne.childhub.org. Until next time, goodbye!